This is the final episode of the three-part series on accountability. In part 1, we examined the mechanism, what it is, why it works, and why the external structure best supports an existing standard rather than providing one in its absence. In part 2, we examined the compliance trap, the over-justification effect, the scaffolding collapse, and the difference between performing for a witness and owning the behavior yourself. Today, we resolve the tension between full dependence and full independence. Hey there, it's me, Core, and you're listening to Exercising Consistency, from fitness to flourishing. From what we learned about the downsides of dependence, we might be tempted to conclude that the answer is total independence. Reject external accountability outright. Become the self-sufficient island who needs no one. This independence would fit with the self-control and self-discipline message of this podcast. But going that far has its own downsides. The better answer is interdependence. This is the capacity to be self-directed while strategically using external support when needed. The internal standard is the foundation, but the healthy system does not exist in isolation. There are pre-existing circumstances that shift constantly, and other individuals with their own standards. The goal is to live from a place of choice, whatever the circumstances, in relation with others, and, here's the key, with your own standards firmly established. The trap of total independence. A person who relies solely on their own strength and ingenuity has created a single point of failure. When a major life crisis arrives, an illness, a grief, a job loss, the person with no external support has no backup. The routine breaks entirely. The system that is fully self-reliant has no slack built into it. Cognitive blind spots develop without external feedback. The person who never lets anyone else observe their practice normalizes poor form, suboptimal habits, and distorted self-perceptions. They lack an objective mirror. They cannot see what they cannot see. The burnout trap is real. Carrying the entire psychological burden of self-regulation alone is exhausting. The person who refuses all help eventually fatigues because there is no one to share the load with. Shame and isolation can compound this. The hyper-independent person often views asking for help as a weakness. When they fail, they withdraw instead of reaching out. The failure becomes internalized as a character flaw rather than a normal part of being human. And there is a biological reality beneath all of this. Humans are wired to co-regulate. The nervous system of one person calibrates against the nervous system of another. Rejecting all social accountability means missing out on the natural regulation that comes from shared experience. The lone operator is not stronger. They are more fragile. The progression. The healthy path moves through 3 stages. First, dependence. I need someone to make sure I do it. Second, independence. I do it myself. Third, interdependence. I have clear personal standards and I strategically use external support when it makes sense and fits my values. Dependence is where many people begin. They lack the internal standard. They need the coach, the deadline, the group. The external standard provides the container. This is not a failure. It's a starting point. The problems arise if that's where it stops. Independence is the necessary middle stage. The person develops their own standard. They learn to keep their own promises. They become their own witness. This stage is essential. The person who never reaches independence will always be vulnerable to the collapse of external scaffolding. But independence is not the final destination. The final stage is interdependence. The person has a strong internal compass. They do not need external pressure to act. And they recognize that strategic use of external support amplifies their effectiveness. They hire a coach for programming and honest feedback, not for pressure. They join a group for connection and shared energy, not as an emotional crutch. They ask for help when life demands exceed their capacity, without that request threatening their identity as someone who is self-reliant. What interdependence looks like in practice. The interdependent person operates differently from both the dependent and the hyper-independent person. They hire a coach for design, not for discipline. The coach provides programming, expert feedback, and an objective eye on form. The coach does not provide the motivation. The motivation is already internal. The coach is a resource, not a necessity. The interdependent person uses groups for energy, not for obligation. The group provides shared experience, the natural dopamine boost of collective effort, and the accountability mirror of honest feedback. But the person would show up anyway. The group is an accelerator, not the engine. The interdependent person asks for help when the load exceeds capacity. Life brings periods where the demands are simply too high for one person to manage alone. The interdependent person recognizes this and reaches out without shame. The request is strategic. It is not an abdication of responsibility. It's an accurate assessment of the situation. And finally, they maintain the floor regardless. The external support is layered on top of an existing internal standard. If the coach cancels, the person still trains. If the group disbands, the person still carries on. The external structure enhances the practice. It doesn't define it. The body as model. The body is the cleanest model for interdependence. Every system is internally regulated. The heart does not need external oversight to pump. The liver does not need a coach to process toxins. The internal standard is absolute. But the body is also deeply responsive to its environment. It needs sunlight to synthesize vitamin D. It needs water to transport nutrients. It needs food for energy, rest for recovery, and social contact for nervous system regulation. The healthy body is not a closed system. It is a self-regulating system that strategically draws on external resources to maintain its integrity. And there are subsystems within the overarching system of the body itself. They include the circulatory, respiratory, digestive, nervous, endocrine, muscular, skeletal, immune, integumentary, urinary, and reproductive systems. All are interdependent. The parallel is exact. The internal standard is the foundation. The external support is the environment that the healthy system draws on when it serves the standard. The body functions within this reality. It does not need someone to make it function, but it functions better when the conditions are right. The 3-question framework. Before using any accountability structure, ask 3 questions. First, does this build or bypass my internal standard? A structure that develops your capacity for self-observation and honest self-assessment is building. A structure that replaces that capacity with external pressure is bypassing. Second, would this survive the absence of the witness? If the behavior would collapse when the coach, the group, or the deadline disappears, the structure is dependency, not interdependence. The test is not whether the structure feels helpful. It's whether the behavior continues when the structure is removed. Third, am I using this by choice or by necessity? The interdependent person chooses the external structure because it serves an already established standard. The dependent person needs the external structure because the standard is not yet established. The difference is visible in the answer to one question. What happens when the external support goes away? The final takeaway. The foundation of any sustainable practice is virtuous self-control, the personal standard of excellence, the capacity to choose and act in alignment with your highest values. That foundation is non-negotiable. Without it, external accountability becomes dependency. With it, external accountability becomes a strategic resource. The goal is not to be utterly self-contained. The goal is to get support by choice. The person who has internalized the standard does not reject help. They evaluate it. They use what serves their standard and discard what does not. The witness is a mirror, not a master. The structure is a tool, not a crutch. The external support is chosen, not required. The body models how this is done. It runs on internal standards. It draws on external resources strategically. It does not need a witness to function, but it functions better in the right environment. You are the same. The internal standard is the foundation. Any externals that fall within that standard is a wise choice. When you're ready to build the internal standard that makes external support a choice rather than a necessity, start your day one inside the Act Score Challenge. That's it for today. Catch you next time.